madness!
Madness. This is Sparta!
President recognizes Mr. Adams of Massachusetts.
Objects of the most stupendous magnitude. Measures which will affect the lives of millions, born and unborn, are now before us. We must expect a great expense of blood to obtain them. But we must always remember that a free constitution of civil government cannot be purchased at too dear a rate, as there is nothing on this side of Jerusalem of greater importance to mankind.
Good morning, June 5th, 2024. Victor.us with a short teaching inspired by children out of the mouth of babes. How inspiring children are. If there is any proof that God is in this world, is when you just see a child play and interact with other children. The innocence of youth, the beauty of childhood, discovering friends, little birds, little creatures. You know, my kids took a raft on the river. Well, it's not a river, but they're down at the creek, whitewater rafting when it rains. And so I love my kids. And this morning, I was inspired to share something based on our morning read with Jedediah. So I'm going to read this little bit to you. Guys, Einstein said that if you really know something that's complex, you would be able to teach it in a simple way. So that's what I'm going to do. You might say all the sum of my book and writings might consolidate down to this short teaching. So if you have the time and patience to learn, and children do, you're going to get something out of it. So I sat with Jed, and we opened up this book, Children's Guide to the Bible. It's got big words. It stretches him at 7 years old. And this is called The Future. War and Destruction. So Jed read this to me. I'm going to read this little bit to you, kind of like I read to children last semester at Streams of Hope. I had a lot of joy reading to children and watching their reading skills grow. War and destruction. Like most people, Jesus' disciples were very interested to know what was going to happen in the future. Jesus taught his disciples about what would happen to them after he returned to heaven. He warned them about disasters and wars to come and false teachers who would pretend to speak on his behalf. Jesus also told his disciples that the temple in Jerusalem would be destroyed. These things all happened during the Jewish War of AD 66 to 70. The Jews tried to rebel against their Roman masters and were severely beaten. The temple in Jerusalem was destroyed, and it seemed that the Jews would never again be masters in their own country. What Jesus had warned about actually happened. And there's the picture. And if you know more of history, you know that many of them fled to the Herod fortress of Masada, and the temple was sacked by Antiochus Epiphanes. And this time of vassalage ended, and they were destroyed. They were no longer masters of their own country. But then in 1948, it all came back. It all came back. So, guys, masters of our own country. So, what really happened to the Jews in the first century? Well, let's go back to the original book over here. It's called the Torah. This is the book of the law. So what happened to the Jewish nation? Well, it's very clear. The Lord spelled out in their original founding documents how this would go. And so if we jump to Deuteronomy chapter 28, you will see a very simple formula. If you obey the Lord and keep his commands, you will be blessed in the city and blessed in the country. Do you like your farm, Hoosiers? Do you like your city house, Hoosiers? Follow God's law, you will be blessed. So God gave them the promised land because they were in covenant. And this conditional covenant was to keep God's laws, the moral laws. But there's one verse in particular I'm going to bring your attention to. If we jump back to here, it says that the Jews would no longer be masters in their own country. That was in their scripture. It says here in Deuteronomy the exact same thing. That the foreigners who reside among you will rise above you higher and higher, but you will sink lower and lower. They will lend to you, but you will not lend to them. They will be the head, but you will be the tail. So Israel, under a monarchy, not God's plan, that's sin of monarchy, and eventually total abandonment of civil law, moral law. The Romans are here, and so now the Jews would no longer be masters. They had synagogues, but no civil authority. Their religious leaders had titles and positions and followings, but no governmental reign. They had no say in government. They were merely tolerated by the Romans. It was game over. Isn't that much like today? We have churches that are like synagogues. Israelites go to feel safe, to feel welcome, to be around like-minded people. Meanwhile, out the walls of the synagogue, the Roman authorities are wreaking havoc. Child protective services, large monopolies, corrupt judges. We have Romans ruling the roost while we have Israelites going to church. And so us, Christians, have let the devil have our land. We have said, here's the keys to the kingdom. We're not interested. We're going to go to our synagogue and worship Jesus. So let's go look at some quotes from John Adams. What did John Adams have to say about the Jews? What did John Adams have to say about this people from which the entire biblical narrative describes from A to Z, these Jewish people? Let's take a look at Jews and the founding of America according to John Adams, the second president of our country. No Christian community in history identified more with the people of the book than did the early settlers of the Massachusetts Bay Colony. Interesting. Let's continue. They believed their own lives to be the literal reenactment of the biblical drama of the Hebrew nation. And these Puritans dramatized their own situation as the righteous remnant of the church corrupted by Babylonian woe, and saw themselves as divine instruments of providence, a people chosen to build their new commonwealth on the covenant entered into at Mount Sinai. These Jews believed that when they founded this nation, they were reliving the ancient text. It was like recycling civilization in the 18th century. Unbelievable. So, let's continue. John Adams. What did John Adams believe, our second president, about the Jewish people? Well, he said, these Puritans viewed their emigration from England as a virtual reenactment of the Jewish exodus from Egypt. To them, England was Egypt. The king was Pharaoh. The Atlantic Ocean was the Red Sea. America was this promised land Israel. And the Indians were the ancient Canaanites. These were the new Israelites entering into a new covenant with God in a new promised land. Thanksgiving, first celebrated in 1621, a year after the Mayflower landed, was initially conceived as a day parallel to the Jewish Day of Atonement, Yom Kippur. It was a day of fasting, introspection, and prayer. Wow. So rewind. We go back to 70 AD. The Jewish nation stopped governing their land. They had a monarchy. That was never God's intent. They had a Sanhedrin, fake righteous men who had no authority in government. Romans had the keys to government, therefore they had the keys to the kingdom. The Jews were nothing more than religious zealots who had forfeited their land because they transgressed God's law. So Deuteronomy 28 is that prescription. It's that, here's what will happen if. Then, centuries later, 1948, they come back. And what do? Do they form a monarchy? No. They formed representative government, just like their founding father Jethro told Moses to do in Exodus chapter 18, verse 21. They took their father-in-law's advice. They took their founding father's advice and reformed in 1948 and fulfilled Bible prophecy. Now let's read what John Adams had to say about democracy in the Middle East. So now John Adams, what he felt about democracy in the Middle East as we read a quote, myjewishlearning.com. Adams was clearly confident that freedom would lead the Jewish people to enlightenment, and that enlightenment would lead them to Christianity. For Adams, Jewish self-governance in the Holy Land was a step toward their elevation. Today, our understanding of democracy includes respect for diversity and support for the retention of one's religious faith. Now, I have just got to share something now. This might get me in trouble, but I'll try to be vague. When you think of modern Israel, what we're dealing with is a millennium-old family feud. It's a family feud. All of them came from Abraham, just about. Jacob and Esau, two nations. Ishmael, a separate nation. But they are all from the same family. And so Thanksgiving is always a family feud in modern Israel, in ancient Israel, and here in New Israel, America. I got to share this. So over at our Pine Valley neighborhood, I got to know the leader of the local Chabad. And he's a wonderful young man from Brooklyn and Jewish. Wife is red-haired, fair-skinned. They have a child, I think. And we love them. They've come by and visited. We've talked about Torah from time to time. And the Chabad here in Fort Wayne resides in Pine Valley, just down from my property. Now, rewind some years. We have some friends who would be considered So these are non-Jewish folks from the Middle East who have lived here many years and have been friends of ours for a long time. And I don't know the nation of origin, but it really doesn't matter. It's the Middle East. They're exceptional citizens, right? Pay tax. Children are well behaved. They own property. They love America. They're not Jewish. And we had Thanksgiving with them some time ago, and it was just great because I met him in business and he helped me with my business, and we're just great friends. I'll leave names out. Well, just recently, they wanted to ask us if we would be willing to host some of their friends' wedding at one of our properties in Pine Valley, maybe 5 doors down from this Chabad, or this Jewish Chabad. And we said, sure. And so we allowed them to have their wedding celebration and their gathering meal there. And so you have Jews and non-Jews dwelling on the same street in this nation we call the United States of America. And there's no bullets flying. There's no rockets. There's no hatred that I know of. And all is good in the hood. Now, that's really a beautiful thing. We're seeing Adam's words come to life. He said that Adams was clearly confident that freedom would lead the Jewish people to enlightenment, and that enlightenment would lead them to Christianity. And for Adams, the Jewish self-governance in the Holy Land was a step toward their elevation. And today, our understanding of democracy includes respect for diversity and support for the retention of one's religious faith. And so what makes new Israel great here in the land of e pluribus unum, out of many one, is that respect and tolerance and patronage. Like, we have customers who are not Christian, customers who are not Jewish. We have Muslim customers. We have Baptist customers. And it only works here because our system of government allows for representation from all faith. And to put the icing on the cake, what we have is a Judeo-Christian nation. That's a different teaching, but what civilizes man? What causes us to all live together in harmony? Well, yes, the Christ in me helps me to love all my neighbors, but it's more than that. It's also law. Law civilizes man. What does John Adams have to say about law?
My worthy colleague from Pennsylvania has spoken with great ingenuity and eloquence. He has given you a grim prognostication of our national future, but where he foresees apocalypse, I see hope. I see a new nation ready to take its place in the world. Not an empire, but a republic. And a republic of laws, not men. Gentlemen, we are in the very midst of revolution. The most complete, unexpected, and remarkable of any in the history of the world. How few of the human race have ever had an opportunity of choosing a system of government for themselves and their children. I am not without apprehensions, gentlemen. But the end we have in sight is more than worth all the means. I believe, sirs, that the hour has come.
And so John Adams believed that when God was giving us the keys to this kingdom, he was not giving us a monarchy, but a nation, a republic of laws, not a republic of men who make laws, but a republic of men who stand on the bedrock of the Mosaic law. And he writes this in one of his letters. How is it possible that he should represent the Hebrews in such a contemptible light? He's referring to this French critic. They are the most glorious nation that ever inhabited this earth. I mean, look at the scriptures and what happened under Solomon, and the wealth of their nation and the glory of High Israel in the ancient world. And Adams knows this history. He says, they have given religion to 3/4 of the globe and have influenced the affairs of mankind more and more happily than any other nation, ancient or modern. Ancient or modern. And he said, the Romans and their empire were but a bauble in comparison of the Jews. A bauble. They were nothing compared. Why? The Romans had a senate, and the Romans had judiciary. The Romans had stadiums. What you're seeing here in America is that we are taking this promised land and giving it to the Romans. We are the masters of our promised land. We used to hold office. We used to hold down the fort, so to speak. From dog catcher, city council, mayor, commissioner, to the legislature, to the judiciary, to all the governing bodies in Washington. We were the keepers of our covenant. And it was plural. We had different faiths. But it was that trace, that remnant of Christ, that was the seed that made it work. And so, Judeo-Christian, the law of Moses, Christian grace, law and grace working together. The Jews gave us America. They gave us civil government. And in 1948, when they came back, that was what they built. It was not a monarchy. And there is diversity in those governing bodies. But we're seeing things start to shift, and that's very scary. So I was inspired to share all this just from reading this short paragraph in this children's guide to the Bible. I really hope you learned something. I really believe that this is what we should be teaching children. They should know our Judeo-Christian heritage. They should know our civics and our history. They should know why Israel lost their land, and they should know what we can do to regain it. And so John Adams, what a guy. I mean, this man defended the British against the colonies. And that is only something that a just judge, a spirit-filled man of God could do, knowing he would be hated and scorned by his own colony, knowing that he would be on the wrong side in his day. He landed on the right side of history. He defended the British during the Boston Massacre because they were in fact innocent. There was some colonists who had fired upon them first, and they defended themselves. So self-defense is in the text, in our Bible. Law is in our Bible. Property lines, boundary lines, it's all there. Judeo, law, Christian grace. We're the salt of the earth because we bring those two things together. And we would never exclude anyone by their ethnicity, faith, Christian denomination, right, from influencing and speaking in this country. If something is true, we would nobody would ever be afraid of it coming out. So censorship and shutting down churches and banning me off of Facebook. That's not very Jewish, Zuckerberg. It's time to wake up. Let's take one more look at what John Adams had to say. This country has done much. I wish it may do more. And annul every narrow idea in religion, government, and commerce. Wow. That it might annul every narrow idea in religion, government, and commerce. It has pleased the providence of the first cause, the universal cause, phrases by which Adams defined God, that Abraham should give religion not only to the Hebrews, but to the Christians and Mahometans, the greatest part of the modern civilized world. Civilization is built on God's laws, moral laws, family. The Bible's filled with family law, inheritance law, property law, land rights, agriculture. Okay, so, quick reminder. The church today is now starting to feel the Roman fire, right? Not because it has to happen, but because they have let it happen. Instead of taking the keys to the kingdom and disbanding their 501c3s and creating political force in every congregation, like we did in the 18th century, like we did in the Revolution, like we did, this isn't, maybe about 50 years ago is when we really dropped the ball. Post-World War II, everyone came home from war and started their life. Israel reformed their nation. The Axis forces were put down. But then something crept in. That Roman spirit crept in where pastors like to go to offices with titles, and preachers love and they hunger for influence, and they want to go to speaking engagements where they can talk about great ideas. Dads go to work to build their man caves. Women stay home or go to work, and they shouldn't. And now society is crumbling, and the Roman element is here. We have big stadiums, lots of money, lots of immigrants all swallowed up by this Roman immigration system, right? And they're destroying churches. They're destroying free speech. They're destroying what the Jews gave us. So the Roman world is really what happens in absence of Christians in government and Jews in government. I talked to the owner or the manager of the Chabad, and his organization doesn't believe in political action. Knock, knock, who's there? Do you want the Romans to burn down your organization? That's not a threat, that's just, a metaphor. Knock, knock, pastor. Do you want the Romans to shut down your church? Of course not, pastor. So, no more synagogues without political action. No more schools without Christian influence. No more church services without political discussion. Let's get our country back. Jedediah knows these truths. My little 7-year-old is learning. Is there hope for the 40-plus-year-olds that this is all new information? Is there hope for the 50 and 60-year-olds who are standing in pulpits and talking? It's just lip service, right? Faith without works is dead. I would say, at least Eric Doden ran for office. Curtis Hill ran for office. Jamie Rittenauer ran for office. We have Christians that know this. We have Christians that do this. Lindsey Hammond, way to go. Woman in power. Ron Turpin, way to go. A Christian in power. So we're going to hold back the Roman oppression. We're going to push back on the Roman spending. We're going to welcome the Republic.
My judgment approves this measure, and my whole heart is in it. all that I have, all that I am, and all that I hope in this life, I am now ready to stake upon it. While I live, let me have a country. A free country.
In the words of Nehemiah, repair the wall. And so this lesson has gone, 27 minutes. You'll sit in church for an hour 10, and you'll hear blah, 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 blah homilies from Catholic preachers and blah, blah, blah feel good from evangelical leaders. I believe what you just heard in the last 28 minutes could change your life, your children, your grandchildren, your state, your region, and your nation. It's true. So like Einstein said, if you can take a big truth and condense it down, it means you know it well. I believe I know these things well enough to teach. Go to victor.us, read some primers, check out the book, buy a t-shirt, buy a hoodie, find out what we're doing. We're changing elections. We're changing outcomes for God's people in office. We're hosting candidates. We're trying to build unity in the body of Christ, so we're not splitting votes. Have a great day. Have a great week. And remember that at any given time in history, the truth we need is the least popular. So you heard it here today. Take that word and run with it. May it not delay. All right. See ya.
Get on out of here. Get on up and leave. Ain't no devil gonna tread on me. He's choking on the blood that ran down the tree. Ain't no devil.